Late 15th century, southern Italy. Inside a sealed royal chamber, servants burn incense until their eyes water. Yet nothing defeats the smell. Sweet, metallic, unmistakable. The odor of living flesh breaking down while the heart is still beating.
When the black bile
A mirror
dominates,
is turned
the
face
patient
down.
weakens rapidly,
A silk
succumbing
veil is
within the
pulled
fortnight.
tight. Because in this court, a woman's face is not private. It is political property. This is Isabella d'Aragona, born into the ruling blood of Naples, traded through marriage as a diplomatic asset. Her beauty secured alliances,
There she
her
is,
body guaranteed
the
stability,
Golden Countess.
and then her skin
wary.
began to fail.
She has the king's
Ulcers,
ear now.
collapse, slow
Good heavens,
disfigurement.
What is she doing?
The court does not call it
Look,
disease,
the powder.
they call it
How completely
silence.
scandalous. This
Here
is
is
an
where the story
outrage.
rewinds, because this didn't begin in her bedroom. It began years earlier with war, with foreign armies marching through
See how
Italy
it
in the
has spread to the
1490s,
lip.
carrying something far more dangerous than steel,
very grave
the Great
indeed.
Pox. A disease no court knew how to name, diagnose, or admit, because to admit it would mean admitting weakness at the very top. And so the records fracture, portraits stop, visitors vanish. Was Isabella infected by a husband,
Look at her,
a physician's
trying
needle,
to appear
or a court
dignified.
that chose secrecy over survival?
The pearls do
This
little
isn't
to
just a
soften
medical
that
mystery.
glare.
If her face was
mercury must be
rotting,
administered
then
immediately.
dynasties were lying.
But the dosage, it's
Before
too
we go
risky.
further,
We have no other
hit like
choice.
and
Look
tell
at
us in the
instruments.
comments, where are you watching this from right now? Because this story may have crossed centuries to reach you. Isabella d'Aragona was groomed long before
How
she was
dare
educated.
she show her face here?
In the Aragonese court of Naples, beauty was not aesthetic.
After what she did,
it was
it is
discipline.
scandalous.
Her hair was pulled back every morning until the scalp burned, sometimes until the skin at the hairline split. Pale skin was enforced with white
The
cosmetic
text says the
pastes.
silver vapors should
Many
not
of
cause
them
immediate
lead-based
collapse.
compounds used
Check
widely
her
among
pulse.
Renaissance elites. The powder sealed the pores, dried the face, and over time could cause irritation, thinning eyebrows, and raw patches that had to be covered again the next day. Some contemporaries noted a faint metallic taste on the breath of women who wore it constantly. The rot did not always begin with disease. Sometimes it began with preparation. This was not excess. It was training. In Naples, a princess's face was a political surface. It was watched, evaluated, compared. Before any major marriage negotiation, young noblewomen were inspected by physicians and senior women of the court. Skin, teeth, posture, breath, looking for signs of weakness, deformity, or chronic illness. It was quiet, procedural, and humiliating. Isabella learned early that affection was irrelevant. Silence and stillness were part of passing the inspection. The Aragonese bloodline was proud, volatile, and paranoid about legitimacy because Italy
She has
itself was
finally fallen
unstable.
from favour.
Alliances
I
shifted
heard the Queen
quickly.
demanded it.
Titles depended on perception.
What do you think they will do to her
A daughter
now?
who appeared damaged could collapse years of negotiation. Isabella's beauty was not celebrated, it was guarded. If the shield cracked, the woman behind it would not be defended. At the same time, Italy was filled with bodies. The Italian wars were beginning. Armies moved through the peninsula, sleeping in shared quarters, treating wounds with reused instruments, carrying more than weapons across borders. Chroniclers wrote about banners and sieges, but soldiers were also carrying ulcers, lesions, and infections no one could yet explain. By the mid-1490s, observers would describe a new disease spreading through camps and cities, skin breaking down, sores appearing suddenly, cartilage eroding. Nations blamed one another for it. And here is the contrast Isabella never saw. While she was being perfumed and powdered inside marble rooms, only miles away the first cases of the Great Pox were blooming on the bodies of men who would soon kneel in her presence. She was being prepared for Milan, a court of mirrors, at the exact moment biology was inventing a weapon that turned the face into evidence. The more lavish the silk, the more dangerous the first lesion would become, because in this world, a woman whose body showed failure was not treated as sick. She was treated as compromised. and Isabella was about to enter a court where everyone watched her skin, not out of concern, but because once the flaw appeared, it would be safer to erase her than to acknowledge what it meant. Milan greets Isabella with brilliance and surveillance. The court of the Sforza glitters, polished marble, gold-threaded tapestries, rooms designed to reflect candlelight back onto itself. But it is not warmth she feels, it is exposure. This is a court built on looking. Mirrors multiply faces, corridors funnel whispers, servants are trained listeners, spies wear velvet. Here, Isabella is not simply a duchess, she is inventory. Every movement of her body is observed and quietly logged. A cough during mass, a flush on the neck after dancing, a faint rash beneath the powder that requires an extra layer to conceal. These details do not stay private. They travel through ladies in waiting, through physicians who speak too freely, through courtiers who understand that information about a woman's health is a form of currency. In Milan, biology is politics conducted at close range. Her husband, Gian Galeazzo Sforza, offers no protection. Contemporary accounts describe him as physically weak and politically sidelined, a duke in title whose authority is steadily hollowed out. The real power stands beside him, Ludovico Sforza, known as Il Moro. He is attentive, calculating, and patient, the kind of man who waits for bodies to fail rather than confronting them directly. For Ludovico, Isabella's face is not a personal matter, it is a liability assessment. This is the psychological twist of Milan. Isabella lives inside a gilded panopticon, where she is watched without being told she is watched. No accusation is ever spoken, no concern is expressed openly. Instead, she is praised, healthy, radiant, fortunate, while the scrutiny intensifies. The more she is complimented, the clearer the warning becomes. Do not change. Medical oversight tightens. Physicians request examinations under the language of routine care. They check her skin, her mouth, her eyes. Any irritation is dismissed aloud and discussed privately. A small lesion is treated aggressively, not to heal her, but to erase evidence. The court understands the stakes. A visible flaw in the Duchess would justify political acceleration, disinheritance, isolation, replacement. Isabella feels it before she understands it. The sense that rest is dangerous, that admitting pain invites consequence, that the body must be managed like a secret. She learns to mask discomfort, to dance through fatigue, to keep her face still even when the powder stings broken skin beneath it. The performance is constant because failure would not be met with care. It would be exploited, and looming over all of it is the quiet fact no one names. Her value depends on remaining intact while the men around her grow stronger by waiting. Ludovico does not need to move against her. He only needs time. Time for illness. Time for a rumour. Time for a single, undeniable sign that the Duchess is no longer fit to be seen. In Milan, Isabella is surrounded by people yet functionally alone, standing in rooms of glass, where everyone is watching her reflection, waiting for the moment it betrays her. The outbreak does not announce itself with banners or proclamations. It arrived quietly, carried out of Naples in 1494 and 1495 with the retreating French army. Soldiers leave behind more than broken alliances and looted churches. They leave bodies that no longer behave normally. Contemporary physicians struggle to name what they are seeing. They call it malfranzoso, the French disease. Not because they understand it, but because blame is easier than diagnosis. This is not the syphilis modern medicine recognizes. Period descriptions are more violent. Skin erupts suddenly, not as isolated sores but as fields of lesions. Flesh peels in sheets. Ulcers spread faster than healers can cauterize them. Faces swell, crack, and collapse. The disease burns hot, then disappears, then returns transformed. Chroniclers describe patients whose skin looked boiled, whose mouths rotted from the inside, whose bones ached as if hollowed. Doctors are confused, terrified, and wrong. From a forensic perspective, Historians still argue about where this pathogen came from. The Columbian theory suggests it was brought back from the New World by returning sailors, mutating rapidly in Europe's dense populations. The pre-Columbian theory argues it already existed in milder forms and exploded into something more aggressive under wartime conditions. Malnutrition, mass movement, sexual violence, and primitive medical practices. What matters for Isabella is not which theory is correct, but how quickly the disease became political. Because this illness did not just attack bodies, it attacked reputations. By the time whispers reach Milan, the Great Pox has already acquired a moral vocabulary. It is described as punishment, as contamination, as proof of corruption. In elite courts, the disease becomes a weapon of accusation. To be suspected of it is to be suspected of moral failure. A single lesion can collapse a marriage alliance. A rumour can end a dynasty. This is where Isabella's danger sharpens. She lives in a court that monitors her biology obsessively. She's married into a family already searching for reasons to sideline her. And now a disease is circulating that turns skin into evidence and illness into shame. If she becomes infected, the question will not be how she is treated, but how the narrative is framed. How did it reach her? There are possibilities no chronicler records cleanly. A husband rumoured to be unfaithful, medical instruments reused between patients, bloodletting needles wiped, not sterilised, or something more calculated. In a court where power depends on perception, accusation can be as lethal as infection. Some later historians suggest Isabella may have been subjected to early forms of biological shaming, her symptoms exaggerated, her illness framed as scandal, her body turned into justification. What is certain is this: once the Great Pox enters Italy's courts, no woman remains safe, especially not one whose value depends on appearing flawless. And Isabella is about to discover that in this world disease does not need to kill you to destroy you. It only needs to be seen. Then, just as suddenly as it arrived, the sickness seems to retreat. The visible lesions fade. The swelling subsides. Isabella's skin, carefully powdered and repainted, appears whole again. Court physicians declare improvement. Not cure, no one is that reckless, but stability. In a world without germ theory, absence of symptoms is mistaken for victory. The court exhales. A dangerous problem appears to have solved itself. Celebration follows quickly. Balls resume. Portraits are commissioned. Isabella is presented in silk and gold, her face composed, her posture flawless. To Milan, the crisis has passed. The Duchess has survived the test. This is the most deceptive phase of the disease. Modern medicine would later name it the latent stage of syphilis, a period when outward signs vanish while the pathogen continues its work, unseen. Treponema pallidum does not leave the body. It migrates, away from the skin, away from the obvious, into deeper tissue, bone, nerves, eventually the brain. But in the late 15th century, this silence was interpreted as mercy. Hope becomes the real hazard. There is a detail recorded in later household recollections, easy to overlook and impossible to forget. A lady in waiting, clearing linens after one of Isabella's public appearances, notices a stain on a discarded cloth. Not blood, not perfume. A single, deep ulcer mark, dark at the centre, edged and unmistakable. She does not raise an alarm. She does not consult a physician. She carries the linen to a brazier and burns it herself, quietly, thoroughly, before anyone else can see. That decision tells you everything about the court's priorities. No one wants a second investigation. No one wants questions. The appearance of health must be protected at all costs. Isabella is encouraged subtly, relentlessly to believe the same thing. She is praised for her resilience, compliment on her beauty, reassured that whatever happened is behind her now. The social performance resumes, and she plays her part because the alternative is unthinkable. This is the psychological trap of latency. When pain disappears, vigilance dissolves. Isabella begins to believe she has outrun the danger. She dances. She sits for painters. She allows herself to imagine a future where her body is no longer the center of scrutiny. The court reinforces this belief because it needs her to be functional, presentable, and silent. Meanwhile, the bacteria continues its work. Unseen, it advances inward, following pathways no one in that room understands. The face looks intact. The damage is simply relocating. What appears to be a miracle is only a delay, and delay is the most treacherous gift this disease offers, because when the symptoms return, they will not announce themselves politely. And by then, Isabella's belief in her own safety will make the collapse far more complete. The change is no longer episodic. It is structural. What began as fever and surface lesions hardened into destruction that cannot be concealed with powder or posture. The skin around Isabella's mouth tightens unnaturally. Small fissures appear at the corners of her lips, reopening no matter how carefully they are treated. Her nose, once praised in portraits, begins to lose definition. The cartilage softens, then subtly recedes. This is no longer inflammation, it is erosion. The court searches for safer explanations. If this is not syphilis, they ask, could it be lupus vulgaris, tubercular skin disease known to eat away at the face slowly? Could it be mercury toxicity, the unintended consequence of aggressive treatments already administered? These questions are not asked to save Isabella. They are asked to protect the dynasty from association with moral contamination. Syphilis implies scandal. Other diagnoses imply tragedy. Tragedy is survivable, scandal is not. While physicians debate, Isabella adapts. She begins wearing heavy veils. Officially, this is described as hygiene, protection, sensitivity to light. But the fabric is thick, layered, designed to separate her face from the air and from scrutiny. Servants notice that the veils are changed often, washed harshly, sometimes burned. The smell beneath them is harder to manage now. Metallic, sweet, faintly necrotic. Incense has increased. Windows are opened, even in cold weather. This is the moment her identity is stolen. A duchess is expected to preside, receive, and display. Court power depends on visibility. But Isabella's presence now disrupts the choreography. Visitors avert their eyes. Conversations shorten. Invitations stop arriving. The body that once secured alliances has become an inconvenience. And in dynastic politics, inconvenience is unforgivable. Records are thin. References to her public appearances grow vague. Decisions attributed to her disappear from correspondence. She is still alive, still titled, still married, but functionally absent. The erosion of her face is matched by the erosion of her political existence. No one says this aloud. Instead, the court behaves as if she is temporarily unwell, resting, indisposed. The language is gentle. The effect is annihilating. Isabella is not punished. She is phased out, reduced from a person to a problem that must be managed discreetly. Behind the silk, the disease continues to eat, and Isabella begins to understand the true nature of her predicament. Her body is no longer failing her alone. It is betraying the system that once protected her. And systems do not tolerate betrayal, especially when it wears a human face. By the early 16th century, medicine did not move toward relief. It moves toward ritual. Isabella's physicians do not speak of healing, they speak of balance. Disease in their framework is excess. Too much heat, too much moisture, too much corruption, and the cure is subtraction by force. When the face begins to deform, when the bridge of the nose collapses inward into what later medicine would call a saddle nose deformity, they do not see bacterial destruction. They see proof that the body must be purged more aggressively. Mercury becomes the answer. The treatment is called fumigation. In practice, it is controlled poisoning. Isabella is placed inside a sealed wooden cabinet, a hot box, her head exposed, her body trapped in rising mercury vapor. The metal is heated until it evaporates, filling the chamber with a dense, sweet metallic fog. She's instructed to endure it until her mouth floods. Salivation is the goal. Pints of fluid spill from her lips into clothes that are immediately removed and replaced. To the doctors, this is success. The poison is leaving the body. What they do not understand is that mercury does not leave cleanly. It accumulates. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. It damages nerves, gums, memory and judgment. Contemporary accounts of patients undergoing similar treatments describe trembling hands, slurred speech, sudden mood shifts, confusion. Isabella's attendants begin to notice changes that cannot be hidden by veils. Moments of disorientation, difficulty focusing, sudden irritability followed by exhaustion. These are interpreted as weakness of character, not neurological injury. The cruelty is institutional, not sadistic. Each session is justified with scripture and precedent. Suffering is framed as purification. Pain becomes evidence that the treatment is working. When Isabella worsens, the dosage increases. When she resists, piety is invoked. A duchess is expected to submit, especially when her body has already embarrassed the court. Her face continues to erode beneath the silk. The nose collapses further. The skin around the mouth thickens and cracks. The mercury, meant to cauterize the disease, accelerates her decline. The infection advances inward while the poison scrambles her mind. This is the alchemy, at the heart of early modern medicine: destroy the patient to save the theory. By the end of these treatments, Isabella is no longer just sick. She's chemically altered, her cognition dulled, her emotions unstable, her body ravaged by both pathogen and cure. The doctors record diligence. The court records obedience. No one records what has actually been done to her. And the most terrifying truth settles in quietly. Isabella is being dismantled by men who believe they are acting righteously, and who will never be held responsible for what their faith has cost her. This is where the disease crosses a boundary the court cannot disguise. By the time syphilis enters its tertiary stage, it no longer announces itself on the skin alone. It turns inward. Modern medicine would recognize this as neurosyphilis, an infection that infiltrates the nervous system, disrupting memory, judgment, and perception. In the early 1500s, there was no such language. What Isabella experiences is interpreted through fear and superstition. She begins to lose continuity. Attendants notice small lapses at first. She pauses mid-sentence, searching for a word she once used effortlessly. Names slip away. First distant relatives, then familiar courtiers, then, according to later recollections, even the names of her own children. At times she seems to respond to voices no one else can hear, turning her head as if addressed from the shadows of the room. Whether these are hallucinations, intrusive thoughts, or moments of dissociation is impossible to say. What matters is how they are received. The court does not see illness, it sees threat. In a culture where reason and self-control are equated with moral worth, mental decline is not treated as a medical condition. It is framed as failure, possession, punishment. Whispers spread that Isabella's mind is unravelling because her soul is compromised, that Naples has sent its sins north, and God is collecting payment. No one challenges these interpretations because they are convenient. A woman who cannot be trusted with her own thoughts cannot be trusted with power. There is a moment recorded in fragmented correspondence that captures the shift. Isabella attempts to sign a routine decree. The quill trembles uncontrollably in her hand. Ink pools on the page, spreading outward in a dark blot. She stops, staring at it too long, as if it carries meaning. The room waits. No one helps her. Someone quietly takes the document away. After that, the paperwork stops reaching her. Decisions are rerouted. Authority is reassigned temporarily. The language remains polite, but the outcome is decisive. Isabella is no longer consulted because consultation requires coherence. Her body had already disqualified her. Now her mind does the same. This is the court's final betrayal. Rather than protecting her, they redefine her symptoms as proof she should disappear. The disease has not only invaded her brain, it has given her enemies the justification they needed. From this point forward, Isabella is no longer a duchess in decline. She's a liability whose thoughts can no longer be trusted, even by herself. and once a court decides that a woman's mind has turned against her, isolation is no longer a precaution, it becomes policy. When her husband dies, the last thread of protection snaps cleanly. Gian Galeazzo Sforza's death removes any remaining ambiguity about Isabella's position. Whatever authority she once held through marriage evaporates overnight. Titles remain on paper, but power does not travel with her. Decisions are made elsewhere. Doors that once opened automatically now stay closed. The court's patience, already thin, disappears entirely. She moved south to Bari. Officially it is described as a change of residence, a quieter environment, better air, privacy for recovery. In reality, it is exile without the dignity of accusation. The Grand Duchess is relocated to the edge of relevance, placed in a castle that functions less as a home and more as containment. Bari is bright, coastal, alive with Mediterranean colour, but none of that enters her rooms. Inside, the light is controlled, curtains stay drawn, incense burns constantly, not for prayer but for suppression, of odour, of decay, of reality. Servants do not linger. Food is left outside her door, trays exchanged silently, like offerings to something no one wants to see. No one sits with her. No one listens. Contact becomes a risk. The only sound that confirms she's still alive is movement. Footsteps, pacing the stone floor. Slow, uneven, sometimes stopping for long stretches. Attendants learn to recognize the rhythm from a distance. When it changes, they whisper. When it stops, they wait. No one asks questions unless silence lasts too long. This is how Isabella becomes a living corpse. Outside, sunlight floods the courtyard. Sea air carries salt and warmth. Life continues audibly. Voices, animals, distant bells. Inside her chamber, the air is stale, thick with smoke and bodily scent that cannot be fully masked. The contrast is obscene. The world is vibrant within arm's reach, and she is sealed inside a darkened space where time loses shape. She's not imprisoned for a crime. She's removed because she no longer serves a function. The abandonment is total but polite. There is no cruelty in the open sense, no chains, no guards posted at her door. Instead, there is absence, the withdrawal of touch, conversation, acknowledgement. In a courtly system, this is efficient form of erasure. A woman without witnesses may as well not exist. Isabella's illness has reached its final social stage. She's no longer a patient, no longer a duchess, no longer a problem to solve. She's something to be managed quietly, kept out of sight, allowed to decay without interrupting the business of the living. And in that room of shadows, stripped of power and audience alike, the last illusion collapses. Survival alone does not equal mercy. When Isabella d'Aragona finally dies, the record barely notices. There is no detailed chronicle of her final days, no medical account describing the state of her body, no witness testimony preserved in the way courts meticulously documented births, weddings, and political triumphs. Her death appears in fragments, dates without descriptions, notes without causes, references stripped of texture. For a woman whose life had once been monitored down to the condition of her skin, the silence is conspicuous. That absence is the investigation. In the early 16th century, elite deaths were rarely vague by accident. Documentation was power. To record was to legitimize. To omit was to control memory. The Sforza and Aragonese families had strong incentives to make Isabella disappear cleanly. A duchess whose face had rotted, whose mind had collapsed, and whose body had become a spectacle of decay, threatened more than personal reputation. She threatened alliances, marriage negotiations, and the moral authority of courts that claimed divine favour. A diseased queen was bad for business. Marriage diplomacy depended on illusion. The church depended on order. Courts depended on the idea that nobility reflected God's design. Isabella's prolonged deterioration violated all three. To describe it honestly would invite questions about bloodlines, divine punishment, and the competence of early modern medicine. Silence was safer than truth. So the scribes went quiet. This is where the forensic uncertainty deepens. Without records, historians are left with possibility rather than conclusion. Did Isabella die naturally, her body finally overwhelmed by infection, mercury poisoning, and neurological collapse? Or was her end hastened through neglect, overdose, or intentional withdrawal of care once it became clear she would never recover? Some later accounts hint at intervention. Others insist there was none. The problem is that mercy and murder look identical when no one writes anything down. What we can say is this: Isabella's death was managed, not mourned. There is no public ritual that matches her former status, no prolonged court observance, no effort to shape her legacy beyond erasing it. She vanishes from correspondence the way a problem file vanishes from an archive, removed not because it lacks importance, but because it has too much. The erasure completes the process that began with her illness. First, her face became unacceptable, then her mind, then her presence. Finally, even her death became inconvenient. The silence of the scribes is not neutral. It is the last act of control exercised over a woman whose body had already been taken from her. And in that silence lies the final horror. History did not forget Isabella by accident. It learned deliberately how to look away. The disease that destroyed Isabella d'Aragona was biological. The horror that finished her was social. Syphilis, if that is indeed the primary agent, followed a recognizable medical path: infection, latency, neurological collapse. Mercury poisoning compounded the damage. Neglect accelerated it. None of that is mysterious. What remains disturbing is not how her body failed, but how efficiently the world around her reorganized itself to pretend it wasn't happening. Once Isabella's face could no longer be displayed, she lost function. Once her mind could no longer perform, she lost legitimacy. And once her existence complicated alliances, she lost protection. The system did not rage against her illness. It adapted to it, by isolating her, silencing her, and finally erasing her. No trial, no accusation, just removal. This is the verdict history rarely delivers. We are comfortable pitying Isabella from a distance. From the safety of centuries, we call her tragic, unfortunate, a victim of primitive medicine. But the more uncomfortable question is closer to home. How do modern systems treat those who cannot be optimized, photographed, or reassured away? The chronically ill who disrupt schedules, the cognitively impaired who complicate authority, the bodies that no longer produce value on command. In every era, there is a point where care becomes inconvenient. Isabella's world chose aesthetics over truth, silence over responsibility, and reputation over a human life. That choice did not require cruelty in the obvious sense. It required coordination, etiquette, and a shared agreement not to look too closely. The same tools that built her into a symbol were used to dismantle her when the symbol cracked. We return, finally, to the mirror. Not as ornament, but as evidence. The polished silver surface reflects no monster. It reflects a woman shaped by forces she did not choose, punished for a biology she could not control, and discarded the moment she outlived her usefulness. The monster was never in her face. It was in the rules that governed who was allowed to remain visible. History is written by the survivors, but the truth is often found in the things they were too afraid to describe. If you want more history told without myth, without comfort, and without looking away, subscribe and turn on notifications.